So that's the change I see. It's like she has a big purpose, right? It's not just Rosalina. She wants to take care of everybody else surrounding her.
Like I said in the beginning, right? She's a strong, fierce person, doesn't like to lose, right? So the fact that she's here and she's taking control of her life and trying to do things that she has a passion for makes me happy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to season 2. This is Shauna.
And this is Rosalina. And we're your hosts for Too Young for This Shit podcast. This podcast is not just about boobs, but our journey with cancer. We are young millennials, open about giving you a raw and unfiltered look into our lives. We are in no way medical professionals, nor are we offering medical advice. Any medical references are cited directly from public websites or from our personal diagnosis. Some topics and stories may be triggering to those who are fighting, have fought, or have loved someone with cancer. Hey everyone, this is Rosalina.
And this is Shauna. Hi guys.
I am excited to welcome my brothers. I have 2 older brothers to our podcast. George is 5 years older than me. And then my other brother, Roberto Carlos, is 3 years older. So I am so excited to bring them on. They've been listening to every episode of season 1. So they're such a fan of ours. But thank you so much for doing this, you guys. Welcome to our podcast.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, how's it going? Happy to be here.
Yeah, excited to be on. I mean, it's a pleasure. I mean, it's like, from listening to now being part of it is, it's awesome.
It's so nice to have you guys here. You were, brought up multiple times in season 1 throughout, Rosalina's story. So it's really nice to have you guys here today.
Yeah, definitely thank you for having us and we look forward to this episode.
Yeah, perfect. But before we get into my cancer diagnosis, the deep shit here, let's get the listeners to know who you are. So George, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is George Felipe. I'm 34 years young. I'm the oldest of the siblings, me, Rosalina, and Roberto Carlos. I am on the East Coast, working as a project engineer for a company here in Jersey. And I'm pretty athletic and active. Fun fact about me is I love running and doing obstacle course races. One thing I've done in the past I'm pretty proud of is I ran this doping challenge race in Walt Disney World, Florida, where I ran almost 50 miles in 4 days. So that's something that I always go back to when I'm ever struggling with something that I've accomplished in the past. That makes me proud to this day.
Yeah, I would say it was definitely cool to see when George put up photos or even videos on IG or even our family chat too. It would be so cool. And then we'd be rooting for you as well. So
yeah, that's amazing. 50 miles would have probably put me in it. 50 miles would have probably put me in a coffin.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie. I don't know if I could have done it.
That's why they call it a dopey challenge. I definitely felt dopey.
Yeah. Roberto Carlos, give us a brief intro about yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Roberto Carlos. I'm 31 years young, as George says. And, it's probably tough to follow up what George said because I never ran anything that far, but I'm the middle child, aka the forgotten child. I'm someone who enjoys being active, eating good food. I love sports, especially baseball. I love learning from others and just being around friends and family. And I think probably the most interesting thing about me is that I like to sing in the shower. So every now and then I'll have concerts, my own private concerts where, I'm pretty much my only fan there, but it's your moment to sing in the shower. And also I do that in the car as well. So if you ever catch me, driving around Jersey singing, that, I'm performing a concert. So
it's like American Idol.
Exactly.
American Idol shower edition.
When we were kids, we had this karaoke game on Xbox. And it would be such a competition between us 3. And Roberto Carlos always wins because he hits the notes. So definitely the better singer out of me and George, for sure.
George, in your own words, how would you describe who Rosalina is?
I mean, whenever I think about my sister, when you first meet her, she's always, positive minded, always smiling, loving, She likes to be goofy. She likes playing pranks on people, especially my parents. Very playful way. She loves being with the family, loves being independent, but she also doesn't like to lose. And she's very fierce and strong-minded person. She's always, every time she enters a room, she's the person that you want to be around with.
That's so sweet.
Just because of what she brings to the table.
Wow, yeah.
I think we're both going to be crying
really
at some point in this podcast.
Yeah. Actually, it's so funny you mentioned about the pranks. I mean, I totally forgot about that. I do that every time I go home during Christmas. It's like my time to shine, to prank my parents.
It never fails.
I love that. Roberto, how would you describe Rosalina?
Just like George mentioned, she's very strong-minded, something that I admire of her. And even from a young age, she's always been that way. And she's a go-getter. So if she wants to do something, she goes out and do it. George mentioned about the pranks, but, she loves to laugh. And oddly enough, she enjoys watching scary movies, even though they freak her out. So I never understood that. And she still does that. So, but yeah, she's someone who's very passionate about her interests. And, you can tell, I mean, right here, what we're doing now, she's very passionate about all this. So she's definitely someone I look up to, even though, I am her older brother, but what she's doing and, the things that she's done over the years, is truly inspiring.
Definitely. I need to hear about these pranks, Rosalina. We're going to have a conversation later.
Some of them are pretty bad, but actually it's so funny. I do enjoy scary movies and scary things. I just like to get scared, even though I probably won't be able to sleep at night, but just like the feeling of being scared.
I'm the complete opposite. I don't know how you do it. Roberto, would you say you and Rosalina are very close? Like, what's your relationship like?
I would say it's an interesting one. Growing up, you would say that we weren't close. We had our differences and, we didn't connect. And that's typical, right, with siblings. You haven't gone through life and you haven't really understood things in general. But that quickly changed as we got older and going through the different phases of life. And, I could pick up a phone now and we can talk for hours. We don't text or call each other on a weekly basis, but I would say it's to the point where, we can connect whenever we're together. I value every time I have with her. And, even though she may not know it, but I truly care when, we do talk and we have our moments together.
That's so nice. And George, what's your relationship like with Rosalina? Are you also super close?
Yeah, I mean, I guess since she was born, really, we've always had a closer relationship. Being the oldest, always one thing about me is I care a lot about my siblings. Ever since she was born, really, we've had a close relationship, and it just continued that way. Things have changed as we got older because she's moved far away, but the long distance relationship, we still try to maintain communication. And, whenever we call each other, it's like we just pick up where we left off, and we like to share advice and life events. She leans on me a lot for, advice or just some feedback or someone to lean on. And I think she got this from me, but I also love messing around and doing pranks on people. So, whenever she comes visit, sometimes I'll do some pranks on her as well.
When we were kids, I would go upstairs and I will call George. I'd be like, George, where are you, George? And then he won't answer. And then I have to go into every room to find where he's at. And he will get me every time. He'll be in new spots to hide and freak me out. It's so funny. I get so scared. I'm like, George, don't do this to me. Not right now.
I used to be laying in the bed and I hear her voice and I'll quickly jump up and find somewhere to hide just because I know she's going to be trying to find me.
I am also the oldest, and I totally understand that being a firstborn and that fierce love that you have for your siblings and that protectiveness. And I feel that with you. I resonate the same thing with my family. So I don't know if that's definitely a firstborn thing.
I think so.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the beginning of Rosalina's cancer diagnosis, George, after discovering your sister had cancer, what was on your mind? What were you feeling?
Yeah. So when I first heard the news, I was in shock. I was definitely in disbelief, because when she called me, she was crying and didn't know what was going on. But then once she told me, it was just this can't be real, right? How can this happen to my sister? It's unheard of, right? That, very small percentage, at least what I thought at the time, very small percentage of people get sick like that at a young age, right? Especially when, she's been healthy, for, up to that point. in the back of my mind while that was happening, I was also thinking about how can I be supportive of my sister, right? And be being, I think it's the oldest sibling syndrome, is that, how can I be a pillar of strength for her, right? I want to be there for her. I'm not gonna lie, I was emotional. I tend to reserve my emotions, but I was emotional, and in my mind, I was just like thinking like, my sister needs me. I need to be supportive in this next phase of her life, in her journey. And I was also thinking like, I didn't want to add to worries too, right? I wanted to find ways to be supportive, but not make the situation worse, right? Or stress her out. So that's kind of like the first thoughts in my mind was just going around, just everything from emotionally how reacting at that moment to, all right, like what can I do to help her in this next phase of her journey?
Roberto, what was on your mind when you found out Rosalina had breast cancer, and how did you deal with hearing that sort of news?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I was in shock. My mind was spinning. My initial reaction was, because it was very limited, you hear the word cancer, you think death. It was tough to hear it, and I was in disbelief. I found out when my sister called my mom, so I didn't hear it directly from her. But even leading up to that, I remember the week before, my sister told my mom, I want to call you because I have to tell you about my doctor's exams. And, at that point I was like, why is my sister, what's going on? Like, something's up, because my sister's very private and I don't remember her sharing any medical information to my mom like that. When I heard about it from my mom, my heart was racing. It was just very hard to concentrate with work. I was working from home. Currently at my sister's room, her presence is here. It was truly hard to kind of handle the news. And it took me some time to collect my thoughts and eventually, text her and say, hey, I want to call. I want to talk, because, now I wanted to face reality, right? In terms of calling her and seeing how she's doing. But it was truly hard. And, thankfully my girlfriend was there to support me. And yeah, I just didn't know what to do. So yeah, it was tough. But once I, picked up the phone, I was ready to have the conversation. Just like George said, I was ready to be positive and provide her the support. We weren't always the closest, but to know that I have her back, and, we could look back and eventually say, wow, we went through some crazy times. And this was probably the most difficult time. But, I wanted to be there for her and really, truly tell her that I love her. And, I wish was there to give her a hug. So yeah, it was tough.
What was the most challenging part of this journey, Rosalina's diagnosis, for you?
It's just not being there to give her a visit. She lives, at the time she was in Seattle, and, moved to California, and give her a hug. We would FaceTime each other, and not being able to see her was tough. I was also, surrounded in an environment where, living at home, my mom is a very emotional person, and, every day she was burst out into tears, crying. And, there was no way escaping, this whole reality. And yeah, it was truly just tough to be, far away and not be there for her. And eventually I did get a chance to, of course, be there for her when I went to visit for her. But waiting and waiting and waiting to eventually be able to go and see her was tough.
My mom is a very emotional person. I can't even imagine being in the same room, in the same household as her, because she's definitely someone who doesn't hold back her emotions. I totally feel you on that, Roberto Carlos.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to have to regulate not only your own emotions, but somebody else's. So that's very difficult, I can imagine.
Yeah, and was part of my challenge too, is of course my brother was seeing this, firsthand in, living with my mom, but from a distance, right? My mom would call me and, she'd just be bursting in tears and saying, my daughter, why did this happen to my daughter? And, I kept trying to console her and try to say listen, my sister is not like anybody else, right? She's like, I keep going back to the fact that she's strong, right? She's very positive minded. We're going to get through this, right? We're family, right? This family, we tend to stick together, to thick and thin, and we're going to continue doing that, right? For as long as it takes, right? But trying to manage those emotions and try to have her, be controlled and focused on my sister needs a support system. And like my brother said, I think the biggest thing is long distance. We were on opposite side of the coast. I'm not be able to like have that physical connection with her and console her during this time. It was tough. But, at the same time, we spoke on the phone a lot. I did research trying to like keep up with what this whole journey was about. Also, that I wish I was able to do was, be there all the time with her, right? Or have her be with me in my house, taking care of her, right? Because I'll take care of everything. Don't worry about anything. Just focus on what you're going through, and I want to take care of everything else. But I didn't have a chance to do that, right? Until I went to visit her later on in California.
George and I had the conversation of, why don't you do chemotherapy in New Jersey? And so there was a conversation happening along those lines. And I said, well, like according to Cancer News, that shows you like top best cancer hospitals. And New Jersey obviously wasn't one of them. Like the best one was in New York. And so I said to George, we're going to drive an hour to New York each time. Like that's just excessive to me. That's a lot. I also felt like if I would have done that, I would have went backwards with my life. And I didn't necessarily want to do that. Also, I think it would be tough because it's like George would want me to be at his house, but my mom would be like, we need to switch off. Like she needs to be in my house this weekend. And then George would have me the other weekend. And I think it would be a lot for me to switch off. So at the end of it, I decided not to do that. But that was a conversation that we had.
Yeah, logistically, that sounds like it would be a lot. And in like a situation where you're already emotionally going through a lot, I don't know if I could have, I don't know if I would have done it either, to be completely honest with you, Rosalina. How did you both deal with like family members asking you about Rosalina's health? And, I'm sure that you guys were both speaking to Rosalina on different levels, like, and your mom asking you what's going on as well. Like, George, like, how did you deal with it? Did you keep things kind of like on the down low, or was Rosalina comfortable enough for you guys to kind of spread that information?
In the beginning, I deflected most of the time those questions. I usually kept my responses very brief, but it was also because this is not my journey, right? This is Rosalina's journey. And even though she shared a lot with me, I didn't want to share something that she possibly did not want to share yet with others. There was a right time later on for that, but in the beginning, it just wasn't my place. I usually kept my responses very brief. In a broader sense, we are a big family, and not everybody has a close relationship with Rosalina. I entertained questions from those that were genuine and that wasn't just like a check off a list.
Right. And Roberto, how did you deal with having to tell family members?
I'm like the same as George, where like it was my sister's journey to tell. In the beginning, I didn't really know what was going on. There was a lot of ifs, and I also didn't feel comfortable talking about it to people. It was one of those things where like after time, there was more of an understanding of what was going on. And especially her going through chemo, that's when, for me, like I started answering questions in terms of, yes, she's doing good. It also was relieving to hear them ask, because it let me know that she was on their minds, because I understand from their standpoint of like, what do I say? What do I do? Do I reach out to her? And I said to them, like, text her. She would really appreciate it. And, hopefully they did reach out to her and directly, because it's one of those things where you've never been through a situation like that before. You don't really know how to comfort the person. And sometimes I'm the person who maybe thinks, hey, let me just let the person have their space. But honestly, sometimes the person doesn't know, like, hey, you're thinking about them. And, by just texting them and saying, hey, thinking about you, like, that's what I started doing myself, because like I mentioned earlier, me and my sister, we weren't really texting on a weekly basis and stuff, but I made sure to let her know that I was thinking about her.
Absolutely. A lot of people don't know what to say when somebody is diagnosed with cancer, or like with anything really. I feel like a lot of people use family members as like buffers as to, what do I say? How's she doing? Is it okay? And I know my siblings got a lot of that. So, yeah, like just being able to say, yeah, like text her, like she would love to receive a text from you just with that information is, yeah, it's nice to, and it's also when you first being diagnosed, like you don't want to be like bombarded with like people texting or calling or like those like heavy emotions, like, people really upset and crying when you tell them. And it can be really heavy. And siblings can bear bear the brunt of that heaviness, because a lot of people don't want to go directly to that person. So yeah, that could be a lot.
Right. It also gets lost in translation when all you do is use your family members or your siblings as the buffer. And, because you kind of respond like, yeah, she's doing all right, or, she's hanging in there, or whatever the response is. And, sometimes that doesn't get reciprocated back to Rosalina, right? Because maybe it's just in that moment we just forgot, right? Whenever we would talk to her. So that gets lost. And sometimes maybe not at the beginning, but later on, it's always good to just directly text her, right? Let her know that you're thinking about her, right? Because I'm not going to go to my sister and say, all right, here's all the people that texted me this week. See how you're doing.
Right.
I'd say yes and no. I don't know if Rosalina, if you feel the same way, I think when you're trying to make hard decisions and I found myself trying to figure out weighing treatment options and all of this, I didn't want to be bombarded at certain moments. So I kind of liked when my partner and my siblings, kind of people were texting them being is she okay? Checking in from a distance for sure.
I was saying, and it's just, and you can answer, both of you can answer this. It's just a different feeling, when you hear it directly from the person. You hearing the messenger, yes, it's great, but hearing the actual person reach out to you, I know it means the world. So
yes, I agree. I agree with Roberto Carlos. In the beginning of the diagnosis, you don't want to be bombarded with all these questions. But once I did the surgery and once I did chemotherapy and radiation, those were the times where people could text me and ask me how I was doing. And I wanted people to know how I'm doing. One thing that I did do when I felt like I was ready to tell my cousins, because we all have a group chat together. When I was ready to tell them, I had a date for my surgery. So I just decided to do a mass text and let them know what was happening. Also put in I'm having my surgery this date. So they know that yes, I have cancer, but it's curable. In the long run, I'll be fine for now in a way, So I definitely try to do that just so they can hear it from me. But another thing that I did do is, especially with my close cousins like Liz and Marlene, I let them know way in advance, hey, I have cancer and I just want to let you guys know. Because I didn't want them to hear it from other people. It was really important for me to have them hear it from me. And that was the same thing with my other two cousins from my dad's side too, Brenda and Laura Lee. It was important for them to hear it from me.
Now you have expressed how big your family is. You guys have a ton of cousins. And my dad's side is very big. I know what that's like. Is health and cancer talked about in your family? I know Rosalina said you guys have a cousin who's a doctor, but is this something that was discussed, or do you talk about doctor's appointments? Roberto, you thought cancer was a death sentence?
It wasn't something where, we talk about health in terms of weight loss, not eating sugars or too much fried food and, the very general American diet. In terms of cancer or any diagnosis like that, no, because something that hasn't happened. And fortunately, my sister is now becoming one of the many, because now we're starting to have a couple people who've, unfortunately had cancer. So now it's becoming a topic of a discussion.
And George, do you feel like your family talked about health and cancer?
Yeah, it's kind of an afterthought. I think, again, it's when people think cancer, people automatically associate it with death, and that it only happens to older people. I think that because we have associated with death, it's just a very sensitive topic. No one wants to talk about that. These are the type of conversation we need to have more of, right? We need to be more open about it, right? We need to know, and not just cancer, just in general. What happens? Something happens to me. We need to be open-minded and say what we're going to do, right? Because we don't want to get in this situation, which just happened, right? Where we were just completely shocked, right? We don't know what to do. We're like, oh my God, this is, cancer's a death sentence. How are we going to handle this? What we're going to do? I just hope that my family takes it as a lesson, learn and talk about it more, be open-minded about having these conversations. Because again, we are resources, right? We are tools. We need to share our experiences so that we are better prepared for, God forbid something happens to somebody else in our family. But if it does happen, that we're prepared for it.
Absolutely. And do you also feel from a cultural standpoint too, it's not talked about? You guys are Hispanic. That's just not something that is talked about? Like everything is kind of very private.
That's exactly it. It's definitely culturally, based, and we're all very private. We don't speak about our health or our experiences until after it has happened.
It's a shame that we don't talk about it. We wait until things happen. Yeah, you can never prepare for it. I mean, I'm sorry, George, you can never prepare for it, but at least be more, I guess, positive in terms of knowing a plan of attack. I truly hope that, eventually we will start talking about whether it's cancer or whether it's anything else related to health.
When I said prepare for it, just to clarify, I meant more of like technology has advanced since 100 years ago, right? So like there's better opportunity for us to live our life, relying on technology, relying on just the support system that we have, be able to be prepared when something like that happens.
George, what was it like taking your sister to the hospital for her mastectomy surgery?
Leading up to that, when we were getting ready to leave, when I saw her, she was very emotional, distraught. At that moment, I felt that I had made the right decision to go with her. Because of COVID, only one person was allowed to go up in the hospital. So if I had went, I was just going to be just in the car or just hanging around. But when I saw her in that morning, going through the motions, nervous, fidgety, made the right choice to just go with her and Brian. And I remember telling him, like, listen, like, you're doing this for your health. This wasn't a routine surgery. Right. This was a life-changing surgery. And I understood what she was going through, being nervous about this whole process that she, this journey that she was about to go on. Right. Even if I wasn't allowed in the hospital, I was just there, there spiritually, emotionally with her. While I was waiting outside the hospital, they had like a little benches. And I was just like talking to myself and just thinking about positive thoughts and, positive outcomes of her surgery. And also like thinking like when she gets out, what can we do to make her feel better?
Having your brother there is completely different than like your partner. It's like a different feeling and like a different experience. I had to do this all over again, which I don't. But if I did, I would have chosen George to be there with me because I feel he would have comforted me more than Brian. Not to say that Brian didn't, but it's different.
We all have people that can be there for us in different moments. Like, for your emotional needs, I think there's different people that fulfill that. And yeah, George might have been that person for you in that moment.
George is that person for me. So George and his wife, Abby, it was the best thing that they could have ever done for me was like come and like be there for me. It's like really nice to have company. And especially company that you feel super comfortable with. I'm definitely like really grateful and thankful for George and Abby that they were able to come and be here for me. That was like the best thing that you guys could ever done.
Now, I know, Roberto, you didn't make it to Rosalina's mastectomy surgery, but you both planned a trip to LA to visit her for her final chemo treatment. What was the hardest part of going to see her for the last chemo?
Because I missed the first part of the surgery and I wasn't there to be part of the other sessions. This meant the world to me to finally be able to go. And days leading up to it, there was a lot of emotions. Once I landed and I finally was able to see her, it was awesome. It's funny, the chemo treatment, you're only allowed to have one person there. So I was waiting in the waiting room pretty much all morning. So again, wondering what's going on, not knowing how she's doing, and the anticipation of finally being able to see her. And I was able to see her in the afternoon. I believe she was cold capping at the time. The moment that I really, and I still remember, and thankfully we were able to capture it, is the ringing of the bell. Yeah, it was truly, it was great. It's one of those moments where like, I was just so proud for her.
Yeah. I mean, you missed the medicine part, but you got to see her sitting in a chair. Like, was it what you expected it to be, or was it different?
It was all foreign to me.
Yeah.
It was odd. It was just like, they knew what they needed to do. And, but at the same time, you like, as someone who's never gone through anything like that, and it's like, wow, like these people are just like really going in there and just like taking these treatments like, yep, this is it. This is all I have to do. And, it was crazy to see how normal they reacted to all these things.
You're just like in one facility with multiple people just sitting there basically fighting for their lives. Yeah, it is. And I think there's like a level of, not acceptance, but this is my life, and people just go in there and they do what they got to do. And it's different. It was different than what I thought it was going to be walking in. I thought I was going to make friends at chemo. Like, truly. I was like, oh, I'm going to meet some friends. Like, yeah, I felt like very lied to. So,
right. You even brought card games too.
Yeah.
You brought those.
Yeah. I was like, I'm making friends at chemo. Yeah. Well, because I watch a show and they had a group of people that play cards, and I love playing cards. I was like, yes, I'm going to have a chemo gang. Like, no, it didn't happen. And George, what was it like seeing your sister in that chair?
This was tough for me. For some reason, when I thought about chemo, I thought of more of like you're in a CAT scan type of like, environment. You're just like laying flat and like you're hooked up on something, but like in this big room, right? And you'll like see her behind a glass. That's what I kind of thought about it for some reason. But when I saw her and just like being hooked up on all these IV and the medication, and I kind of felt like she was kind of like strapped down. You can't just get up and move whatever you want. That was tough for me because like at that moment, I kind of wanted to like swap places with her and take the pain away from her. I will say that when she was done, that was a milestone for us. One of many firsts. We were just so excited, like my brother said, that she finished her last chemo and we got to celebrate these small wins, right? Even though we knew that she was moving on to radiation therapy, but these are small wins and we got to take it.
Right. It was like one chapter done, like one part done.
One chapter done. Exactly.
I was looking forward to completing chemotherapy, but also like completing it with my brothers and my sister-in-law too, because she also came as well. I remember feeling very defeated with my 5th infusion. And I told Brian, I was like, why I'm going to do the last one? What for? Like, I just don't even see a reason to do that. But I think what like gave me the strength is knowing that my brothers will be here. And it's like, okay, I'm going to do this because like, my brothers will have my back and will be here with me. I am definitely like super grateful to have my brothers be there for my last one. And also what was really nice is that Brian went to hang out with his friends in DC. So I was able to have like the whole house to myself and just hang out with my brothers and Abby. And that was really nice. Another thing that I really liked was George was like, you're going to come with me to New Jersey just so like he could take care of me. We stayed here in Los Angeles for a week. And then the next week we flew to New Jersey so I could spend the rest of my time with George and Abby and my parents and Roberto Carlos as well. That whole month was what I needed. I really needed that. I needed some family time for sure.
Now, George, you and your wife, Abby, went to visit Rosalina twice. What was it like coming for those periods? And like, how did you see Rosalina coping?
We, wanted to be there for her, but we were also trying to think of like all different ways to make her feel comfortable, right? And not be stressed about, the simple things, making meals, right? Giving her space to, rest and take naps when she wanted to. And not worry about doing things around the house, including, our dog nephew, Louie. Me and my wife spoke before the trip. We're like, all right, our goal is to make her feel comfortable and make sure she's healing, right? That's the most important thing. We want to make sure she's healing. She wasn't the same person we knew before cancer, or the treatments. She took a lot of naps, wanted to stay home, lay down. Sometimes we felt like she was like quiet and tired all the time. Joked very little, which was understandable. We were there just to make her life simple, right? Whatever it is, we were there to help her.
That's so nice of you guys. We'll have to get Abby on here too, maybe next season.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Roberto, have you seen like a change in your sister since, being diagnosed, going through treatment, and now being done with treatment?
I will say, her personality is still the same, but she has changed in terms of opening up and bringing awareness, what we're doing here with the podcast. Before, she was just like me and my brother. We're very private. We don't really share too much. And the reels that you guys see on social media, I'm not surprised by those things, but, she used to dance and do these things. We would see them, privately, but to see her actually publicly post these and show her who she really is, it's wonderful. It's great. It's inspiring to see, what she's like, passionate about and what she wants to do. So that's the change I see. It's like she has a big purpose, right? It's not just Rosalina. She wants to take care of everybody else surrounding her and, publicly, right? And that's something where, that's the change that I see. And I'm very proud of that change, that she's, taking those steps.
And now that you see her, it's on social media. We have a podcast. She's talking about it. Like, do you find it difficult to talk to her about her experience, or like when it comes just like to you and her, do you feel like she's open about talking about everything and you feel comfortable enough to ask those questions?
At first it was, difficult. This is pre-treatment and everything, but now, no, I think it's easy to have that conversation, right? It's like, hey, how's it going? What's going on? What's the next step? Or even, when she was going through radiation, or even, what's coming up in the upcoming months. It's easy to have that conversation. We never, even before chemo, it was never difficult to have conversations, right? Our relationship is in a way where like, we're very like, it's weird. It's like, we're not like texting each other or, constantly, checking up on each other. But when we have conversations, we're like, it's a very open conversation. And like, yeah, it's awesome. Just like the fact that, we can just talk about anything if we wanted to.
Right. I would say with my brothers, I am open to telling them like what is going on with me. I don't feel like I have to be private with them. I have trust in my brothers, and anything that I say, obviously they're not going to like repeat back to other people. I have no problem telling them like, yeah, I'm going to have a mastectomy, or yeah, I'm going to have my exchange surgery in the next few months.
But what, like emotionally too? Like emotionally being vulnerable to your brothers?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. That was tough because I didn't want them to see me that way. I think no one really does, right? Like you don't want to show weakness.
Right. And scare other people.
Yeah, I think during this whole experience, I've learned that I needed to be vulnerable. This experience has changed that for me.
Yeah, and releasing that, I think, is such a healthy, being able to release it. And even just crying, like that is a release, even if you're not saying anything. And yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and just to add to that, when my wife and I went to visit her, I think the second time, we were very, like I said, we were, trying to be very positive minded about this whole journey, but we also made room for vulnerability, right? So I do remember, my sister came downstairs and we were talking, and she just kind of just started crying. And we allowed it to happen. One thing that we had to understand is that we can't just be, have a barrier or this shield of strength at all times, right? We gotta show vulnerability, right? We gotta show that we are humans with emotions, right? And especially when someone's going through this journey, right? You just want to provide that type of open door policy, right? You can talk to me about anything, or you can express yourself in any way, whether anger, sadness, whatever it is, right? Just getting your emotions out there and being comfortable with who you're doing it with.
George, have you seen like a big change in Rosalina?
Since, she completed the chemo and radiation therapy, fast forward to, this year, I've seen, obviously through the journey, we saw not the same Rosalina that we've seen in the past, but fast forward to this year. And I think that, she mentioned before that she wants to try new things, live in a more positive mindset, live life to the fullest, right? Not stress over the little things. And I'm seeing that, right? I'm seeing that she's kind of, like my brother said, opening up more about her experience, but also, not letting what happened stop her from doing things that she was doing before, right? Like dancing, right? And being silly, being, happy and laughing, right? So like, I'm happy that I'm seeing that because, like I said in the beginning, right, she's a strong, fierce person, doesn't like to lose, right? So the fact that she's here and she's taking control of her life and trying to do things that she has a passion for makes me happy.
I love that. What is one moment that you will remember from this experience? I know you just mentioned like her being able to, open up and be vulnerable and just cry to you, but is there another moment?
Yeah, so 2 moments, that I would just never forget. And it's the first call where she told me that she had cancer. And then, the chemo treatment, which was a tough experience for my brother and I, for my family. But on the positive side, all like the different milestones and the fact that like she kept fighting each of the way to achieve these milestones, like I'll just never forget that.
And Roberto, what are some moments or one moment that you'll just never forget about this experience?
Just like my brother mentioned, the milestone, the fact that, she went through the surgery, the chemo treatments, the radiation, me being there in person to witness the ringing of the bell, it was a moment that, I still remember like it was yesterday. Just being there in California and us, like my sister mentioned, it's not every day that we're all together. And it just felt so good just to be there with her and George and of course Abby was there. But we were exploring California. We were bonding, we're laughing, watching. I think probably we watched a scary movie or something. But yeah, it was just and it just felt like old times, and like it was awesome.
I love that. I feel the kind of the same way when it's like gang's all here, gang's back, like the original gang. Like that's like when I'm with my siblings, I feel that too. Like, and you could just be stupid and silly or like bring up things that I always like feel bad when I'm with my boyfriend or like we're just, going on like a tear on something that, he didn't know us when we were 4 or 5 years, 6 years old, and it's just, you could just be silly and be just like your most like authentic self with these people. And I love that. I'm glad that you guys got to experience that. I'm so glad, that bonding time, especially after something so traumatic is nice. What have you both like learned from this experience? Is there anything that you can take away from, Rosalina's cancer diagnosis?
Yeah, I would say do not take life for granted. Spend more time doing things that you love to do and with the people that you love to do it with. Gotta make the best of it, right? Live life to the fullest. Things that you've been thinking about doing, stop thinking about it. Just do it. Prioritize your health. With COVID, some of us have fell off with that, but, get back to it and continue to prioritize your health. It's very important to get checkups, blood work. This is a lot of information, right? No matter what age you are, right? You got to get checked up, take care of yourself. I think is the bottom line.
Roberto, what is one thing you've learned from this experience?
I'm going to piggyback what George was saying. Don't take life for granted. Spend time with your friends and family. Make the effort. I think that's important because one thing is, you spend time when, you happen to be all around each other, but, actually, if you're far apart, make the time, make the trip, make the phone call, let them know that you're thinking about them. And when you do eventually hang out with one another, enjoy it because, we're not gonna, it's not like when we were younger where you could spend time endlessly with each other and you don't know when the last day is going to be. And, like George mentioned, health is very important. Get yourself checked, that's something where like you don't think about it, especially being young. And it's something where, for me, like it's in the back of my mind, hey, let's get these things, situated. Do something that you maybe thought about doing, as George mentioned, do it. And, I would say that, I look up to my sister in terms of the things that she has done recently. And, I myself have gone out and done things that I probably would have never done, maybe a couple years ago. And, yeah, it's like one of those things where like once you start realizing, wow, like how precious life is, that's when things starts to click in terms of, you start prioritizing what means more to you than what it was before. But yeah, definitely that is something where, I'm going to continue doing and even looking out for my family as well, because that's something that's very important to me. And, if I can help them in any shape or way, I'm going to be there for them.
Yeah, I would definitely, there's two things I want to say. One thing is, when I found out I had cancer, it's not that like I didn't think my brothers would be there. Like I knew that they would, but it's really great to see that, they really had my back throughout this whole experience. So this was like the moment and the time that when I needed them the most. And it was really nice for them to show up. And I'm super thankful and grateful. And I'll always remember that. And so I think also like, obviously no one wants to get cancer, but I think like this experience, if I have to like learn from something, is that like it definitely like brought us closer. And I think that we were able to be more vulnerable with each other, just because like how we grew up and all of that, like we tend to hide our feelings and mask what we actually feel. But now we're able to really open up with each other, which I think is really important. And I think it took a next step into our relationship. I would say that the second thing is, I've always kind of had like both my parents, obviously, like we all care for them, and we try to get them like the best health possible. But I definitely would say, like with my mom, like I'm a little bit more focused on her, because there are just things that she would say, like, oh, I had this rash for like 2 weeks. And I say, like, why didn't you go to the doctor? And she's like, oh, no, it's fine. And it's like, no, it's not fine. You need to go see the doctor. Or like more recently, it's like, you need to get a mammogram. Like every year you need to get a mammogram.
So, cancer obviously is just hard enough for, everyone in your family to deal with. Like, were there happy moments? I know you guys discussed, you guys got to be together after the bell ringing and then had your week in LA and then bringing Rosalina home. But like any other happy moments?
The one that sticks out to me is her coming this past December for the holidays. That was the first time she was coming, and eventually she wanted to see family who haven't seen her. So like the only people that have seen her at that point was my brother, my brother's wife, and my parents, and maybe like one cousin. But aside from that, no one else has seen her. And we surprised her. She had no idea. So I believe it was George who picked them up from the airport. That's right. George picked them up from the airport. And we were hiding in our living room. Everybody came. Everybody parked their cars far away. So
it was me, Brian, and Louis that George picked up. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It was Brian and Louis, and my sister. And she had no idea that we were there, and we had a bunch of balloons, and it was like a mini party. It was like a welcome back. When she walked through those doors and she went right into the kitchen, that big surprise and the emotion was priceless. And, she was crying, and it was emotional, but an exciting moment for everybody to see her. And yeah, it was just great. It was great to capture that moment. And also just throughout the whole week, we were spending time because of the holidays together. So that was something where, it was kind of like a celebration.
It's so nice of you guys to throw that for her.
I told Brian I wanted to have like a party. My parents and my brothers already were planning that when Brian sent them a message like, hey, Rosalina wants to party. Like, oh, we were already thinking about that. So it was really nice. Just like a regular party, and I saw my cousins, and I saw my parents, and I saw my brothers, and it was just really nice.
A nice celebration. That sounds really nice. And George, any other happy moments?
Yeah, I think that she spoke about this in season 1, I believe. Having Louis in her life during this process was a blessing in disguise. He came into her life, before all this happened, and it was just at the right time. And, just like I said before, just seeing this new version of Rosalina just blossom is another, happy moment. We'll be here again when we celebrate, when she's done with hormonal therapy, right? And we'll just keep celebrating these milestones, right? This is not, the hard part is over, but this is going to continue on. So we'll be here, and she'll continue fighting.
Yeah. I love that that too. Like, it just doesn't end because, radiation is finished. Like, there's a whole other chapter that comes with after cancer. And I love that you said that. Like, it just doesn't end here. And not a lot of people know that. And I thank you for saying that.
Of course.
And thank you so much for coming on here and being vulnerable and honest about like having to deal with this and see, your family member and your sister and like somebody you love so deeply have to go through this and watch and just on the sidelines. And I don't know what that's like. I went through it, but I don't know what that's like. And I'm glad that you guys both were able to come on and share that experience. This isn't easy.
Yeah, I agree. It's really great to hear like a different perspective of someone who's not actually going through the cancer diagnosis. It's really important to also get that perspective, especially since we're Latinos, and it's just something that not a lot of people talk about. So thank you for coming on, and thank you for representing our culture. That's super important to keep that awareness going. Thank you all for listening and supporting our podcast. Sharing our stories with you has been incredibly healing for both of us, and we hope it helps other women in their journeys through breast cancer.
Ladies, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and fellow breasties. Help us reach more women by subscribing and rating us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and now on YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram at TYFTS Podcast and email us at tyftspodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from you guys, so shoot us a message. We will link any resources from the episode in our show notes.